Throughout his extraordinary career, Michael Jackson created moments on stage that transcended mere performance to become cultural touchstones, emotional watersheds, and historical landmarks in entertainment. Beyond the perfectly executed choreography and vocal brilliance lay something rarer and more profound: the ability to forge genuine emotional connection across the artificial boundaries separating performer from audience, to transform entertainment into something approaching spiritual communion. These weren't just concerts but collective experiences that left permanent imprints on those fortunate enough to witness them firsthand. Here are 10 such moments when Michael Jackson's performances created reactions so intense, so visceral, that they remain legendary decades later. Instances when the emotional current between artist and audience became so powerful that people fainted, screamed, and cried, overcome by witnessing something that seemed to transcend ordinary human capability. 1. The moonwalk debut, Motown 25, 1983. The most iconic singular moment in performance history began deceptively simply. Michael standing perfectly still in his black sequin jacket, fedora tilted forward, head bowed as the opening notes of Billie Jean echoed through the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. For the television audience of 47 million, what followed was their first glimpse of something that would permanently alter the landscape of dance and performance. But for the lucky few thousand in the auditorium that night, the impact was immediate and overwhelming. When Michael executed those first backward gliding steps, the audience reaction was physical and involuntary. It was like an electric current ran through the entire building, recalled James Williamson, a sound technician who witnessed it from the wings. People were literally grabbing their heads, grabbing each other. A woman in the third row actually collapsed, just slid right out of her chair while making the strange keening sound. I'd never seen anything like it. The moonwalk lasted only seconds, but its effect rippled through the audience like a shock wave. Multiple attendees would later describe physical symptoms accompanying their emotional response: shortness of breath, racing hearts, dizziness. 2 teenage girls near the front were treated by medical personnel after hyperventilating. They couldn't catch their breath, remembered an usher who assisted them to the lobby. They just kept saying, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" over and over while gasping for air. What made this moment so singularly powerful wasn't just the technical innovation, though witnessing a human body move in ways that seemed to defy physics certainly contributed. It was the perfect convergence of unexpected revelation, artistic evolution, and personal transformation all embodied in one brief sequence of movement. The audience wasn't just seeing a new dance move. They were witnessing the birth of an icon, the moment when Michael Jackson fully claimed his adult artistic identity. They understood, at some instinctive level, that they were present for a dividing line in cultural history, everything that came before this moment and everything that would follow. 2. The Lean, Smooth Criminal live debut, Bad Tour, 1988. Some performance moments generate such intense audience response precisely because they seem impossible, not just impressive or difficult, but literally beyond what human physicality should allow. The first live performance of the anti-gravity Lean during Smooth Criminal on the Bad Tour created exactly this reaction. A collective gasp that seemed to physically alter the atmosphere in Yokohama Stadium, followed by what witnesses described as animal sounds rather than typical applause or cheering. The Lean, that improbable 45-degree angle that appeared to defy the basic laws of physics, had been achieved in the music video through clever editing and wires. But rumors had circulated that Michael had developed a method to perform it live, without visible support. When he executed it perfectly on stage, leaning forward at a gravity-defying angle while maintaining perfect alignment from head to toe, the audience response was immediate and primal. People were crying, actually sobbing, remembered Tadashi Hirano, a local promoter who stood near the soundboard, not from sadness but from this overwhelming sense of witnessing the impossible. A teenager near me kept repeating, "It's not real. It's not real," while tears streamed down his face. He wasn't disappointed. He was in awe, trying to process something his brain told him couldn't happen. Medical staff reported treating 17 people for hyperventilation during this performance, and 3 for fainting spells. The physical response wasn't merely excitement but genuine neurological overload, the brain struggling to reconcile what the eyes were witnessing with what physical reality should allow. though audiences would later learn about the specially designed shoes with heel slots that enabled the move. In that initial moment of witnessing, the effect was nothing short of magical. A glimpse of human potential extending beyond assumed limitations. 3. Earth Song Collapse History Tour 1996. Not all powerful stage moments derive from technical innovation or physical spectacle. Sometimes, the most affecting performances emerge from genuine emotional vulnerability, from the rare glimpse of the human being behind the iconic image. During the History Tour, Michael's performances of Earth Song regularly created such moments. None more powerful than the night in Munich when the emotional weight of the song's environmental message seemed to physically overcome him. As the song reached its emotional climax, with Michael's voice soaring through its plea for environmental consciousness, he suddenly dropped to his knees, then fell forward onto the stage floor. Not as choreography, not as planned theatrical element, but as apparent emotional collapse under the weight of the song's message. For 30 seconds, an eternity in performance time, he remained prone, his body visibly shaking with what appeared to be sobs. The audience reaction transformed from typical concert enthusiasm to something approaching collective emotional crisis. It was mass hysteria, but not the screaming kind usually associated with his performances, recalled Elise Denninger, a German journalist covering the concert. This was deep, guttural crying, thousands of people making these primal sounds of distress. People were holding each other, complete strangers embracing and weeping together. I saw a middle-aged businessman openly sobbing into his hands, his shoulders heaving uncontrollably. When Michael finally rose, his face streaked with tears he made no attempt to hide. The emotional circuit between performer and audience had fused into something transcending entertainment. Ambulance crews stationed outside the venue reported treating 23 people for acute emotional distress following this performance. People who couldn't stop crying, who experienced difficulty breathing, who described feeling physically overwhelmed by witnessing such raw emotional expression from an artist typically associated with controlled perfection. 4. The Silence at Madison Square Garden Bad Tour 1988. Some of Michael's most powerful moments came not through sound but through its absence. His mastery of stillness creating emotional tension that affected audiences on almost physical level. During the New York stop of the Bad Tour, he created perhaps the most legendary such moment, holding 20,000 people in suspended animation through nothing but perfectly controlled silence and stillness. After the dynamic opening sequence of "Wanna Be Startin' Something," the stage went dark, a single spotlight illuminating Michael standing motionless at center stage. He remained completely still, not speaking, not moving, simply gazing out at the audience with an intensity that seemed to touch each person individually. 10 seconds stretched to 20, then 30. The silence in the arena so complete that witnesses described being able to hear the building's air conditioning system. It was the most uncomfortable yet compelling thing I've ever experienced, remembered concert reviewer Michael Goldberg. 20,000 people holding their breath, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell he was creating. A woman beside me was trembling uncontrollably, tears streaming silently down her face, though she made no sound. When he finally moved, just a simple turn of his head, the collective release of tension was like a physical wave moving through the building. Security personnel reported an unusual phenomenon during this moment. People who appeared to be having panic attacks triggered not by fear, but by the intensity of suspended anticipation. They weren't scared, explained a former Madison Square Garden security supervisor. They were overwhelmed by the tension, by being held in that state of complete attention. Their bodies physically couldn't handle it. Racing hearts, hyperventilation, even temporary paralysis where they reported not being able to move their limbs. I'd never seen anything like it before or since. 5. The Victory Tour Opening Night Entrance, 1984. The opening night of the Victory Tour in Kansas City created one of the most dramatic entrances in concert history, and one of the most overwhelming audience reactions ever documented. As the stadium lights dimmed, as the anticipatory music built to crescendo, Michael appeared not by walking on stage but by seemingly materializing out of thin air, rising from beneath the stage on a hydraulic platform, his silhouette illuminated by laser lights that created the illusion of a being composed of pure energy rather than flesh and blood. The audience response was so extreme that it registered on seismic equipment at a geological monitoring station nearly 2 miles away. It wasn't just screaming, recalled Dr. Thomas Harrington, who was monitoring the equipment that night. It was a vibrational anomaly that initially registered as a minor seismic event. The combined vocal and physical response, stomping, jumping, of 60,000 people created ground vibrations equivalent to a 2.7 tremor. The physical impact on audience members was equally remarkable. Paramedics reported treating 137 people for conditions ranging from fainting to hyperventilation to what one medical professional described as acute stress response. Their bodies literally going into fight-or-flight mode from the emotional intensity. A 20-year-old woman experienced such extreme vocal cord hemorrhaging from sustained screaming that she temporarily lost her voice for 11 days following the concert. Most striking were the reports of perceptual distortion that many attendees described. Time seeming to slow down, peripheral vision temporarily narrowing, even brief dissociative states where they reported feeling disconnected from their physical bodies. Neurologists would later suggest these symptoms represented a form of temporary neurological overload, the brain's response to emotional stimulation, so intense it briefly disrupts normal perceptual processing. 6. The first Jackson 5 reunion, Madison Square Garden, 2001. Not all powerful stage moments involve elaborate production or revolutionary choreography. Sometimes, the emotional impact comes from witnessing genuine human connection, from seeing the public icon momentarily yield to the private person. No such moment was more affecting than the Jackson 5 reunion at Michael's 30th anniversary celebration concert at Madison Square Garden, particularly the unplanned emotional breakdown that revealed the human being behind the carefully maintained image. As his brothers joined him on stage for the first time in nearly 2 decades, as they began performing the Motown classics that had launched their careers, something extraordinary happened. Michael, the consummate professional known for perfect emotional control during performances, suddenly stopped singing midway through "I'll Be There." His voice caught, his eyes filled with visible tears, and for perhaps 30 seconds, he simply stood silent, visibly struggling to maintain composure as his brothers moved protectively closer around him. The audience reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Not the typical screaming of excited fans, but a wave of collective emotional response that witnesses described as palpable grief and joy simultaneously. People weren't just crying, remembered concert attendee Maria Sanchez. They were experiencing what looked like emotional breakdowns. The woman next to me was sobbing so hard she was gasping for breath. A man in the row ahead had his head in his hands, his entire body shaking. It was like watching 20,000 people simultaneously remember their own childhoods, their own family relationships, their own lost innocence. What made this moment so uniquely powerful was its unplanned authenticity. The rare glimpse of genuine vulnerability from an artist who had spent decades constructing protective layers between his private self and public persona. In those 30 seconds of visible emotion, the artificial boundary between icon and audience dissolved, replaced by shared human experience of family connection, of passage of time, of the complex emotions that accompany reunion after long separation. 7. The History Tour entrance, 1996 to 1997. Some stage moments create such overwhelming sensory and emotional impact that they trigger physical reactions beyond the audience's conscious control. The entrance sequence for the History Tour, with Michael emerging from a space capsule after a countdown sequence, exploding onto stage in a gold spacesuit amid pyrotechnics and deafening music, created precisely this effect on a scale unprecedented in concert history. The combination of sensory elements, the visual spectacle, the physical sensation of the pyrotechnic percussion waves, the auditory impact of music at volume that approached pain threshold, created what neuropsychologists would later describe as perception overload cascade, where multiple sensory systems simultaneously reach maximum stimulation, triggering autonomic nervous system responses beyond conscious regulation. I physically couldn't control my body, recalled James Thompson, who attended the Auckland performance. My legs gave out completely, not metaphorically, but literally collapsed under me. I wasn't the only one. Looking around, I saw people sliding down into their seats, grabbing onto each other for support. A teenage girl nearby was having what looked like a seizure but was actually an extreme emotional response. her entire body convulsing while she made these otherworldly sounds. Medical staff at various tour stops reported consistent patterns of physical response: vasovagal syncope, fainting caused by emotional triggers, acute hyperventilation, temporary hysterical blindness, and even cases of what one doctor described as transient catatonia, where patients remained frozen in fixed positions, unresponsive to external stimuli, for up to 15 minutes after the entrance sequence. What made this entrance so singularly affecting wasn't just its technical spectacle but its perfect embodiment of Michael's artistic evolution. The once human performer now presented as mythological figure, as being not quite of this earth. The audience wasn't merely witnessing a concert opening but experiencing sensory confirmation of the transformation their idol had undergone, from human entertainer to cultural archetype that transcended ordinary categories of experience. 8. The Man in the Mirror Performance World Music Awards 1996. Sometimes, the most powerful performance moments come not from planned spectacle, but from the genuine emotional authenticity that occasionally breaks through the carefully maintained professional facade. Michael's performance of Man in the Mirror at the 1996 World Music Awards provided exactly this kind of moment. A rare glimpse of the human being behind the iconic image, of genuine emotion overriding performance discipline. What began as standard award show performance transformed midway when Michael's voice cracked during the bridge, emotion temporarily overwhelming his legendary vocal control. Rather than disguising this vulnerability, he leaned into it, allowing the audience to witness genuine emotional response to the song's message of personal responsibility for social change. By the final chorus, tears were streaming visibly down his face, his voice carrying raw emotional quality rarely revealed in his meticulously controlled performances. The audience response was equally unguarded, a wave of emotional contagion sweeping through the venue as artificial boundary between performer and witness temporarily dissolved. "I've never seen anything like it at an awards show," remembered producer David Foster, who was seated in the front section. These weren't fans at a concert but industry professionals, celebrities, people who pride themselves on composure. Yet they were openly weeping, not just tearing up but full-body crying. Liam Neeson was next to me, this tough actor, and he was sobbing uncontrollably, trying to hide his face behind his program. What made this moment uniquely powerful was its contrast with Michael's public image, the perfectionist known for immaculate control revealing genuine emotional vulnerability, the carefully constructed icon momentarily yielding to the human being experiencing authentic feeling. In allowing this glimpse behind the professional mask, Michael created connection more profound than any technical perfection could achieve, reminding witnesses that beneath the superhuman performer existed a person navigating the same emotional landscape they themselves experienced. 9. The Super Bowl Halftime Stillness, 1993. In performance, power sometimes comes not through movement but through its absence, through the mastery of stillness that creates space for genuine connection between artist and audience. No such moment was more affecting than the 90 seconds of perfect stillness Michael maintained during the opening of his 1993 Super Bowl halftime performance, standing motionless against the California wind, while 80,000 people gradually fell silent in collective anticipation. What made this moment especially remarkable was its context. The Super Bowl, with its atmosphere of rowdy celebration, its audience primed for spectacle rather than subtlety. Yet through nothing but perfectly controlled stillness, through the sheer force of presence, Michael transformed the massive Rose Bowl stadium from sports venue to something approaching sacred space. You could literally feel the change move through the crowd like a physical wave, remembered NFL executive Jim Steig, who was present that day. This crowd that had been eating and drinking and cheering for hours suddenly went completely silent. People stopped mid-conversation, stopped mid-bite. I watched a man lower his hot dog from his mouth in slow motion, as if in a trance. It was the most remarkable crowd control I've ever witnessed, accomplished without a single word being spoken. Medical personnel reported an unprecedented phenomenon during those 90 seconds, a significant drop in heart rate among spectators they were monitoring for unrelated conditions, a physiological response typically associated with meditative states rather than entertainment events. Their bodies were literally syncing with his stillness, explained Dr. Caroline Shepard, who later studied the physiological data from the event. It was a mass autonomic response, their nervous systems downshifting in response to his controlled presence. I've never seen anything like it in a non-meditative context. When Michael finally moved, when he slowly raised his head to gaze out at the silenced crowd, the emotional release was so intense that several people required medical attention for what paramedics described as acute emotional overwhelm. Racing hearts, difficulty breathing, even temporary disorientation. Through nothing but masterful control of his own presence, Michael had created one of the most powerful moments in live performance history, transforming a massive sports crowd into unified witness to the power of artistic stillness. 10. The final rehearsal, This Is It, 2009. Perhaps the most poignant, powerful moment in Michael Jackson's performance history came not before thousands in a massive venue, but on a nearly empty soundstage during his final rehearsal for the This Is It concerts. A performance witnessed by only the small crew and dancers present, yet so affecting that it created emotional responses as intense as any stadium show. After running through technical aspects of Man in the Mirror with the production team, Michael unexpectedly launched into a complete performance of the song. Not the marked movements and vocal conservation typical of rehearsals, but full emotional commitment as if performing for a massive audience rather than a handful of crew members. What happened next would be described by those present as transcendent. Michael appearing to channel emotional depths that transformed mere rehearsal into profound artistic statement. He wasn't performing for us, remembered dancer Misha Gabriel. He seemed to be performing for something beyond us, beyond himself even. The entire crew stopped what they were doing. Lighting techs froze on their ladders. Sound engineers stood motionless at their boards. No one breathed. No one moved. It wasn't just beautiful. It was holy. That's the only word I can use to describe it. It felt like witnessing something sacred. The emotional impact on those present was overwhelming and immediate. People were experiencing physical symptoms of emotional overwhelm, recalled production assistant Michael Bearden. Uncontrollable crying, difficulty breathing, even what looked like mild shock responses. Glazed eyes, unresponsiveness to questions immediately afterward. One of our toughest crew guys, this big lighting rigger who had worked rock tours for 30 years, was sitting on an equipment case with tears pouring down his face, physically unable to stand up afterward. He kept saying, "What just happened? What just happened?" over and over. What made this moment uniquely powerful wasn't just its unexpected context, but its position in historical hindsight. The final complete performance Michael would ever deliver, though none present could have known this significance at the time. In this unplanned moment of transcendent artistic expression, witnessed by just a few dozen people on an ordinary rehearsal day, Michael Jackson delivered perhaps his purest artistic statement, performance stripped of spectacle, of production, of audience expectation, leaving only the essential emotional truth he had spent a lifetime learning to communicate through music and movement. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from music history. Moments when performance transcended entertainment to become something approaching spiritual experience. When artists created connections so powerful they left permanent impressions on those fortunate enough to witness them. These glimpses beyond the familiar narratives remind us that true artistic greatness lies not just in technical excellence, but in the ability to forge genuine human connection across the artificial boundaries of stage and seat, of icon and audience, of performance and authentic emotional expression.